Imagine walking into a bank, ready to handle your business, but instead of being treated with respect, you're mocked, humiliated, and dismissed, just because of the color of your skin. That's exactly what happened to James Carter. A racist bank manager thought he was just another black man to belittle. But what he didn't know. James Carter wasn't just anybody. The next day, James came back, and this time, he wasn't alone. What do you think? Have you ever experienced discrimination like this? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. Also tell us where in the world you are watching this video from. Before we dive in, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Also, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Let's get into it. James Carter stepped out of his black Mercedes, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. He was a man who had worked tirelessly to build his business from the ground up, and today, he was at the bank to make a major withdrawal. A new expansion of his company was in the works, and he needed capital to finalize the deal. He walked through the double-glass doors of Winston National Bank, where he had been a loyal customer for years. The air was cool, and the scent of fresh coffee lingered. A few customers sat in the waiting area, some standing in line at the teller booths. James made his way directly to the manager's office. Behind the desk sat a middle-aged white man with a sharp suit and a sharper attitude, Bradley Cartwright. He was new to this branch, and James had never dealt with him before. But from the second James stepped into the room, he could feel the hostility in the air. Cartwright leaned back in his chair, barely looking up from his computer screen. Yes. James extended a hand. James Carter. I need to make a withdrawal from my business account. A large one. Cartwright ignored the handshake and raised an eyebrow. How much are we talking about? $250,000. The manager let out a sharp laugh. I see. And what do you need that kind of money for? James narrowed his eyes. I don't believe that's any of your business. It's my account. My money. Cartwright finally looked at him. His smirk was laced with condescension. And you expect me to just hand over that amount? Without any verification? James kept his voice even. You can check my account details. Everything is in order. Cartwright sighed and pulled up the information. As his eyes scanned the screen, his smirk faltered for a second, just a second, before he plastered it back on. Well, Mr. Carter, I see that you do have the funds, he admitted begrudgingly. But policy dictates that large withdrawals require further verification. James sat forward. I've withdrawn large amounts before. No issue. New management. New rules, Cartwright said smoothly. James clenched his fists. I don't see anyone else being subjected to this nonsense. Just me. Cartwright leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, I know your type. You walk in here in a nice suit, trying to look like a businessman, but let's be real, you don't belong in places like this. And you sure as hell don't have this kind of money legally. James' blood boiled. You're making a big mistake. Cartwright chuckled. Am I? Security. Two uniformed guards stormed in. Escort Mr. Carter out of the building. He's causing a disturbance. James stood, fists clenched at his sides. You'll regret this. Cartwright smirked. Doubt it. As the guards shoved James toward the exit, the bank's customers watched in stunned silence. Some shook their heads, others looked away. James knew exactly what had happened, humiliated. Disrespected, but this wasn't over, not by a long shot. James Carter sat in his car outside Winston National Bank, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled rage. His heart pounded as he replayed the humiliation in his mind, the sneer on Bradley Cartwright's face, the way security had dragged him out like a criminal. He had spent his entire life proving people like Cartwright wrong, and yet, here he was again, but this time, things would be different. James wasn't just some ordinary man with a bank account. He was a businessman with connections, resources, and most importantly, power. And if Cartwright thought he could get away with this, he had another thing coming. James pulled out his phone and dialed a number. The call connected instantly. Mr. Carter, a deep voice answered. What can I do for you? Anthony, James said. I need a favor. There was a brief pause. The kind that requires a lawyer or the kind that requires a cleanup crew? James exhaled sharply. Let's just say. I need to send a message. Anthony chuckled. Say no more. I'll get the team ready. We move tonight. James hung up, his pulse steadying. He wasn't going to let this slide. By the time the sun rose, Cartwright would understand exactly who he had messed with. The city streets were quiet, the bank's towering structure standing ominously under the glow of streetlights. A black SUV rolled up to the curb, its engine humming before it went silent. Four men in tactical gear stepped out, their movements swift and controlled. James emerged last, dressed in black, his jaw set with determination. Anthony handed him a suppressed pistol. You sure about this? James took the gun without hesitation. 100%. The team moved like shadows, scaling the side of the bank with grappling hooks. Within minutes, they had bypassed security cameras and deactivated the alarms. James followed closely, his adrenaline surging as they slipped inside the darkened bank. Anthony pointed toward the manager's office. He's probably at home, but we'll leave him a little surprise. James smirked. Perfect. They swept through the bank with precision, hacking into the security system and extracting confidential files. Transactions, internal memos, anything that could be used against Cartwright. And then, they got to the fun part. Anthony pulled out a spray can and tagged the manager's office wall in bold, dripping letters, "Karma's coming." James placed an envelope on Cartwright's desk, filled with documents exposing his illegal activities, evidence of discrimination, fraudulent transactions, and money laundering. The kind of information that could ruin a man's career. As they exited the building, James took one last look. He could already imagine Cartwright's reaction when he walked in tomorrow morning, but this was just the beginning. Tomorrow was the real reckoning. Bradley Cartwright strutted into the bank with his usual arrogance, nodding smugly at his employees as he made his way to his office. Today was going to be a good day, another step in his climb to higher power. He had crushed another arrogant black businessman who thought he was important, but the moment he stepped into his office, his blood ran cold. His desk was covered in files. His name was scrawled across the top of an envelope, and a spray-painted message in bold, menacing letters covered the wall behind him. His hands shook as he ripped open the envelope. As he skimmed the documents inside, his throat went dry. These weren't just random bank files, these were his private transactions. Forged approvals and fraudulent activities. Someone had been in his office, someone knew. A nervous sweat broke out across his forehead. If this got out, he wouldn't just lose his job, he'd go to prison. His phone buzzed. He grabbed it quickly. Yeah. A robotic voice on the other end spoke. We know everything, Cartwright. Cartwright's knees nearly buckled. Who is this? The voice continued. By the end of today, you'll understand what humiliation really feels like. For the first time in his life, Bradley Cartwright felt something foreign crawl up his spine. James leaned back in his leather chair, watching the security footage from last night's break-in. He smiled as he saw Cartwright's face twist in panic. It was only the first step. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Tanya, stepped in. Sir, we've been tracking his movements. He just made 3 urgent calls, to his lawyer, his boss, and the police. James smirked. Desperation. Tanya crossed her arms. What's next? James tapped the desk. We push him further. Cartwright's nerves were shot. Every time the phone rang, he flinched. Every time an employee walked past his office, he jumped. He felt the walls closing in, and then James Carter walked through the front doors. Cartwright's stomach dropped. He wasn't alone. A group of men in expensive suits followed behind him, their expressions unreadable. The entire bank went silent. Employees froze, customers looked on in curiosity. James strolled to the front counter. I'd like to make a withdrawal. The teller, a young woman with wide eyes, hesitated. How much, sir? James smiled. $250,000. A shiver ran through Cartwright's body. The teller glanced at the manager's office. I need to get approval. James leaned in. Oh, I think he's expecting me. Cartwright had never felt such terror. James wasn't just here to withdraw money, he was here to make a statement, and Cartwright had no idea how much worse things were about to get. The tension inside Winston National Bank was thick enough to cut with a knife. Employees whispered nervously as James Carter stood at the front counter, waiting. His men, sharp-dressed, stone-faced professionals, formed a silent wall behind him. The teller swallowed hard, then turned and scurried toward Bradley Cartwright's office. Inside, Cartwright sat frozen at his desk, staring at the spray-painted words still scarring his office wall, "Karma's coming." His mind raced, calculating ways out of this nightmare. The last thing he wanted was to see James Carter again. But when the teller stammered, "Sir, he's here," asking for his withdrawal, he knew he had no choice. Cartwright stood on shaky legs, wiped his sweaty palms on his slacks, and forced himself to walk to the counter. As he stepped into the open, his face paled. James was already looking right at him, a knowing smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Mr. Cartwright," James said smoothly. "Good to see you again." Cartwright cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter. I apologize for yesterday's misunderstanding, but James held up a hand. "No need for apologies. Just give me my money." Cartwright's eyes darted around the room. The bank's customers were watching, employees whispering. His reputation was already cracking, but he couldn't afford to let it shatter completely. He forced a tight-lipped smile. "Of course. Let me authorize it." Cartwright turned and rushed back to his office. His hands trembled as he punched in his credentials, unlocking the bank's high-security vault system. He had no choice now. James had the upper hand, but just as he confirmed the transaction, his phone rang. He snatched it up. "Yes." A deep voice on the other end chuckled. "Mr. Cartwright, you should step outside." Cartwright's breath caught in his throat. He didn't recognize the voice, but something about it made his skin crawl. Slowly, he turned toward the bank's glass entrance. Outside, 3 black SUVs were parked along the curb. Men in suits and sunglasses stood beside them, their stance rigid, predatory. Cartwright's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Who the hell were these people? Then his office door swung open. James Carter walked in, alone this time, shutting the door behind him. He moved with unshaken confidence, settling into the chair across from Cartwright's desk. "Bradley," James said, his voice casual, almost amused. "You seem nervous." Cartwright forced a dry swallow. James leaned forward. "I want to make something clear to you. Yesterday, you humiliated me in front of everyone here. You tried to make me feel small. But today, things are different, aren't they?" Cartwright licked his lips. Listen, I was just following protocol." James chuckled. "No, you were following your own prejudice. And now, you're realizing that you messed with the wrong man." Cartwright's fingers twitched on his desk. "You got your money. What more do you want?" James studied him, then reached into his jacket pocket. For a split second, Cartwright flinched, fearing a weapon, but instead, James pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the desk. Cartwright hesitated before picking it up. His eyes scanned the document, his heart stopped. It was a formal complaint to the Banking Commission, detailing discriminatory practices, fraud, and unethical behavior, all under Cartwright's name. Attached was a letter from a U.S. senator demanding an immediate investigation. Cartwright's hands shook as he met James' eyes. You wouldn't." James smirked. "Oh, I already have." The blood drained from Cartwright's face. If this went public, he was finished. No more cushy job. No more power. He'd be lucky to find work as a gas station clerk. His voice cracked. "What do you want?" James stood, adjusting his cuffs. "You'll find out soon enough." Then he walked out, leaving Cartwright staring at the paper with wide, terrified eyes. This was far from over. Tomorrow would be even worse. Bradley Cartwright sat in his dimly lit office, a half-empty glass of whiskey trembling in his grip. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled from running his fingers through it all evening. The paper James Carter had given him earlier sat on his desk, staring back at him like a death sentence. The Banking Commission investigation alone could ruin him. But that wasn't what terrified him the most. It was the SUVs parked outside his bank. The men in suits. The cold look in James Carter's eyes. His gut told him something worse was coming. His phone buzzed, shattering the silence. He jumped, nearly spilling his drink. When he picked it up, he saw a blocked number. Hesitating, he answered. Hello. A deep, calm voice spoke. Mr. Cartwright. I hope you're enjoying your evening. Cartwright shot up from his chair. Who is this? The voice chuckled. You know exactly who I am. And you know why I'm calling. Cartwright's stomach twisted into knots. Look, tomorrow, the voice interrupted. You're going to apologize. Publicly. Loudly. And you're going to make it right. Cartwright gritted his teeth. And if I don't? Silence. Cartwright flinched as a gunshot rang out through the phone, his heart pounded. What the hell, the voice remained eerily calm. That was just a warning shot. If you don't do what you're told, the next one won't be so distant. Cartwright's legs nearly gave out beneath him, the call ended, and for the first time in his life, Bradley Cartwright truly feared for his life. 6 a.m. Winston National Bank. Cartwright barely slept. He arrived at the bank early, his eyes bloodshot, his nerves frayed. His mind raced through the possibilities. Could he call the police? Would anyone even believe him? He was a bank manager, not some gangster caught in a turf war, but James Carter. The man moved like a ghost. He had powerful connections, and those men in the SUVs weren't just some business associates. They were something else. Cartwright stepped into his office, locking the door behind him. He had one option left. He needed to call in a favor. A big one. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It rang twice before a rough voice answered. Bradley. Cartwright swallowed hard. Vincent. I need help. There was a pause. Then, Vincent Mancini, an old friend with dangerous ties, sighed. You in trouble? Cartwright exhaled shakily. Yes. Big trouble. Vincent grunted. All right. I'll handle it. But it's gonna cost you. Cartwright closed his eyes. I don't care. Just fix this. 9:30 a.m. Bank lobby. James Carter arrived exactly on time. Unlike yesterday, he didn't bring his men. He didn't need them. His presence alone was enough to freeze the room. Cartwright watched from his office, wiping his sweaty palms on his pants. He had a plan now. He just needed to hold his ground. James stepped up to the counter. I believe Mr. Cartwright has something to say. The entire bank went silent. Employees and customers turned toward the office. Cartwright took a deep breath and stepped out. This was it. He cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen. A gunshot exploded through the bank. Chaos erupted. Customers screamed. Employees ducked. Cartwright hit the floor as glass shattered around him. Then, more gunfire. Men in black tactical gear stormed the bank. Automatic rifles flashed as they fired into the ceiling. Cartwright's plan had just gone to hell. James Carter, unfazed, turned slowly toward the intruders, and then, he smiled, because he was expecting this. The moment the gunmen stormed the bank, panic seized the air like a vice. Customers screamed, diving for cover behind counters and chairs. Bank employees huddled beneath desks, trembling. The smell of gunpowder filled the room as more shots were fired into the ceiling, raining down plaster and shattered light fixtures. Cartwright's breath came in short gasps as he crawled behind his desk, his mind racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Vincent Mancini had promised to handle it. But these weren't his usual enforcers. This was something else. Then, James Carter moved. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't scared. In a swift, practiced motion, James grabbed a chair and flipped it over, using it as cover as he reached for his waist. A gun. Cartwright's eyes went wide. He's armed. James exploded into action. Two of the gunmen dropped instantly, crimson mist bursting from their bodies. The room turned to chaos. The remaining shooters turned their weapons on James, but he was already moving. Fast. Precise. Deadly. He rolled behind a desk as bullets shredded the air where he had just been standing. One gunman, masked, armored, moved in, raising his rifle. But James was faster. He popped up from behind the desk, one shot to the chest, another to the head. The shooter collapsed. The other men hesitated now. They weren't expecting this, neither was Cartwright. He had hired these guys to scare James Carter, maybe rough him up. But instead, they were dying. His stomach twisted in fear. Who the hell is this guy? Then the front doors slammed open, more men rushed in. but they weren't the gunman's reinforcements, they were James' backup. Dressed in sleek suits, moving like professionals, they swept through the bank, taking out targets with ruthless efficiency. Gunfire. Screams. Chaos, and in less than 40 seconds, it was over. The gunman lay motionless on the floor. Blood pooled beneath them. Cartwright couldn't breathe. He slowly peeked over his desk. James Carter stood in the center of the carnage, completely calm, lowering his smoking gun. His men checked the bodies, securing the area with cold precision. Then, James turned, and locked eyes with Cartwright. The bank manager felt a cold chill run down his spine. James walked toward him, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor, stepping over the bodies like they were nothing more than obstacles. Cartwright pressed himself against his desk, trapped. James stopped inches away. Towering over him, then, in a calm, almost amused voice, he asked, "Did you really think I wouldn't see this coming?" Cartwright's mouth opened. No words came out. James leaned closer. "Now. It's my turn." Bradley Cartwright shook uncontrollably as James Carter towered over him. The entire bank was a war zone, bodies on the floor, the stench of gunpowder heavy in the air, bullet holes scattered across the walls. The customers and employees remained huddled in fear, but nobody dared to move. Cartwright gulped hard, trying to force words out. James, listen. This was a misunderstanding." James chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. Only ice-cold menace. A misunderstanding? James crouched slightly, getting level with the bank manager's face. "You hired hitmen to take me out, and you think you can talk your way out of this?" Cartwright's breathing hitched. James turned his head slightly. Nodding to one of his men. A large, heavily built enforcer with a scar across his cheek stepped forward, and punched Cartwright across the face. Cartwright's head snapped to the side, and he crumpled to the floor, groaning in pain. Blood dripped from his busted lip. James squatted next to him, placing his silenced pistol on the floor between them. "You humiliated me yesterday," James said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You treated me like I was beneath you. Laughed at me in front of your staff, your customers. You thought I was just some nobody." Cartwright whimpered, shaking his head desperately. Please, I didn't know who you were." James grabbed him by the collar and yanked him up to his knees. "You didn't need to know," James hissed. "You should treat every man with respect, no matter who they are. But you?" He shook his head in disgust. "You enjoyed it. You enjoy stepping on people, don't you?" Cartwright was too terrified to respond. James glanced at one of his men. "Bring her in." The doors opened again. A woman in an expensive black suit walked in, heels clicking against the floor, the regional director of the bank. Cartwright's boss. Her face was a mask of cold professionalism, but there was a distinct sharpness in her eyes as she glanced at Cartwright with pure disappointment. "Mr. Carter," she said, nodding at James. "We received your complaint. We also received the evidence, security footage. Audio recordings, witness testimonies. It's all been reviewed." She turned toward Cartwright. "You're fired." Cartwright's heart stopped, his mouth moved, but no words came out. James smirked. "Oh, that's just the beginning." The director continued. "An internal investigation has also been launched regarding the bank's handling of racial discrimination cases. The Banking Commission will be conducting a full audit." "And Mr. Cartwright?" Cartwright flinched. He already knew what was coming. "You will be blacklisted from the banking industry," she finished. "No financial institution will hire you again. Ever." Cartwright felt his entire world collapse, his cushy career, his six-figure salary. His position of power, it was all gone. James leaned in, whispering in his ear, "That's your punishment." Cartwright let out a choked sob. James stood, straightening his suit. He turned to his men. "Let's go." As he walked away, he glanced at the terrified employees and customers. "Apologies for the mess," he said casually. "It was unavoidable." Then, without another word, he and his men left the bank, and Bradley Cartwright was left in ruins. Hope you enjoyed this story. What do you think about what happened to Cartwright? Do you think he deserved what he got, or do you think James went too far? Let me know in the comments. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, let me know where in the world you're watching from. See you in the next one.